G'day, welcome to Pay It Forward. So today I have my new little pattern, very requested little pattern, is my little Ladybug. This original design came about 20 years ago, so she's a very old lady really, but we've given her a new lease of life. So I hope you enjoy making this one. Very simple. I'm even in ladybug mode myself. Can you see that? How lucky was I? I got a ladybug tie this week. It was meant to be, totally. And look, even on my ears, I'm just totally in the zone today. So if you're ready to make this one, all you need to do is find that free pattern. It's in the description box below. Simply need to click on that link and you can print out your free pattern templates on your own home printer. Do make sure that you set your printer in the settings to print at actual size. That way all of your little pattern templates will be exactly right for you. And I always include all seam allowances in my patterns for you. It makes it so much easier. So let me show you how I put together little ladybug. So let's have a little look here today at what we're going to need to make our ladybug. Now this Lovebug here is a very old little one, probably again about 20 years old, and she has been packed away in boxes, so she's a little bit limp here and there. And I've just changed the pattern slightly at the base so that it makes it easier for you. But basically this is what we're going to end up with. Now your colouring is entirely up to you. I'm kind of kicking myself that I didn't make her up in orange this time. Never mind, I went with the classic red and that always looks nice, but this pattern can be made up just in beautiful brights. I'd love to see it in beautiful hot pink or greens and just make it a lovely little character bug. So we're going to need, let's have a look, we're going to need our body side pieces here, and I've made mine in felt. You can make it in fabric if you like. We need to make the head in felt for sure. I've got my usual fusible woven interfacing on the back there in a medium weight. We have our front panel, which is nice in a fabric. Choose a nice bold fabric there. And then we're going to need our base section. This is a little cover for our base. Now we're going to be pulling in the base section around a disc. I've made that one up using my template, and I've made that up with a couple of pieces of mat board, which is Picture Framers mat board. I just used little offcuts from my local picture framers. I've glued two together so it's really strong. So that will be drawn in the base, and then we've got our little base circle of felt with interfacing applied to go over that. And then we need our wing pieces. Now our wing pieces are made from what I call felt fabric, which is felt fused together with a fabric print using fusible webbing, and the same with the wings. So I've got two different prints there. On the wings we don't see a lot of that print, it's just the underside of the wings, and the same with the little top wing, but we do see a little bit more of that. It does tend to sit up. So to make felt fabric, I've got a video that talks to you about preparing fabric for sewing, and I'll put the link up the top there for you for that one. We're also going to be needing little boots. So we've got little boots here, and they are just felt with interfacing applied. You've got your two little boots there. Going to need your head pieces. So we create a little cap with this little one. So I've got my felt interfaced, my two side head pieces, and my head gusset piece. And then we have our little cap pieces, and they are felt with fusible webbing applied. They're going to be ironed on, and same with the cap section here, lines up the back there, so we get that lovely little front cap detail. We're also going to need a neck joint, and now I've recently done a video about different sorts of joints you can use. On this project you can substitute your neck joint for some large buttons. You'll need them to be about 25 millimeters or 30 millimeters. Alternatively, you can use a joint like I have here, but I'm going to put the link up the top for that video and you can see what I mean. The button joint system will work very well with this little one if that's what you're going to go for. Mine is 25 millimeter, but you can use a 30 millimeter joint here. We're also going to need some sort of trim for the front of our little ladybug. Now this time I'm just going to be using some wide rickrack there. Just add something. Now the front of this little ladybug, you can really decorate any way you like. You can put any sorts of trims and so on. You can see there that initially I just used a velvet ribbon, added a little button. I'll be adding a little button this time too, a nice big black heart there. Whatever you like you can do there before we put this little one together. We're also going to be needing our little braided cord lengths for our arms and legs, and we need 6 of those. And I'm just using classic braided cord. I've gone for a black and white one this time, and they are all cut to about 8 inches or 20 centimeters. So that's longer than we need, but that's fine. We will trim them up to suit. You also need, for the ends of your little arms, so we need 4 little beads. So I'm going to use the little wooden beads there. They're a bit longer, and we'll just be knotting below those. So 4 of those, but you really can use anything there. You'll also be needing some hat elastic for those little antennae that we have here. These will sit up quite well, it's just it's been so long. And we will need a couple of little beads to go on the ends of those. So we will also need our extra strong threads. You're going to be needing some pearl thread or embroidery threads for your blanket stitching, and also some little buttons to add to the wings. And I like to use the little black and white ones to add to those little wings, just to give some little dots there, extra detailing. Again, you can use anything you like. We're also going to need a button for the center of where we join that wing there. I'm going to go for a larger one this time. So that's about it. You will need your clear craft glue, and of course if you're using cotter pins or so on, you'll need your turners to turn that neck joint. And we're also going to need eyes, and I'm just using a little, it's about an 8mm eye I'm using here. Keep them nice and small. I'm using teddy bear glass eyes, but definitely safety eyes will work very well with this pattern. So you can give those a go as well. Alternatively, you can just use buttons. So to begin with, we're going to start with the little head. And to start with, the way that we do our head pieces is I've removed the backing paper from my fusible webbing there, and we're just going to line that up with each piece. And we're going to press these pieces into place. You see the little cap just fits beautifully. Line it up with those outer edges. Get those pressed into place with a hot iron and a protective cloth. And there I have her face little cap pressed into place there. I keep saying her, I always think of that with a ladybug. So being a ladybug automatically makes me a girl. Is that it, Flyboy? No, they can be boys, can't they? So perhaps I'll change this one to a little boy. I'll try and keep track throughout the video. So what I'm going to do now is I want to create a little trim around the front of that little face section. Now, depending on what colour you're making your little one, I'm going to go for the red. You can see there that I've sewn that little blanket applique stitch around the outside there. And I actually did that on this one once the head was filled, but I feel like that might be a little bit too challenging for some. So we're going to do it first. So I've got my extra strong thread, which is ideal for this sort of work. It's nice and fine, and it stays nice, and it doesn't fatigue as it goes through the fabric. So I'm sewing a blanket applique stitch, and I will put the link up the top there to show you that stitch. I've got a video that shows you that stitch, and I'm going to keep my stitches really, really tiny. So I've come through the back, I've got a knot in the end, and I'm just going to take my first stitch and go through both fabrics and come out right on that edge of that little curve there. Make sure that I'm bringing my needle out through the loop. And if you'll notice, I've just started a little way from the edge because we will be sewing that one, so there will be a seam allowance there. So my next stitch, keep them nice and small so we get just a lovely detailed little line of colour there that just frames up that face, and I'm just going to make my way around that little cheek section on both of those pieces and also on this little peak here. Once you have your stitching done there, and you can of course if you don't want to do a blanket applique, you could just stitch that on the machine. You could do a close little zigzag in a contrasting colour, or just a straight stitch if you like. Now the next step is to, once you've got that piece, that head gusset all done, you want to lay your pattern piece on and put in your little antennae marks on the back of that piece. And then you need to take your awl, I don't know if you can see, just see through those little holes there. I've gone from the top through. I don't want to come from behind and make that hole, because I want it to stay all nice and black. I don't want to push through any of those whiter threads. So I've made that hole only just big enough to pass the end of my little piece of hat elastic through. So you don't want to make a large hole, you want to just squeeze it through. I've cut those little pieces of hat elastic to around about 4 inches long. We're going to trim them if we need to trim them. Better too much than not enough. And you can see that end I've taken through. I'm just tying a knot just close to the end. And that's going to hold that little antennae. And you can see they really do sit up when they haven't been packed in boxes for years. So I'm just going to add that second one there, going through. Important not to make that little hole too big, because you don't want that knot to pull through. If you feel unsure and you think you're worried about that knot pulling through that little hole, you could always add a little bead on the underneath, and that way it never would. Tie that one up. And pull those through, because it's just much easier to do them now than when the head is all put together. What you have to be aware of is not catching them in your seams as we're sewing that head up. So our next step is to do that. We're going to start, and we're working on the head gusset. So we're going to line up, this is the neck, the base there with the neck. I'm going to start with our pinning, and we pin in that 3D style, where we take a pin straight through both layers, flip it over and take up a little bit of that underside fabric. Push our pin head all the way down. Just line those edges up, pin through both, flip it over and take some up on the other side, pin head all the way down. You can see that little section will all line up very well, and we're going to travel all the way back down to the back of the head. What we have to watch is, as we come up, this is the little front of our face, you want to make absolutely certain that your little cap section lines up. So you've got your little cap section here. This is the seam we're sewing now, and you want to line up those two pieces so that it's nice and flush when it's all done. So be careful to make sure that they are. Keep pinning into place, and you'll pin all the way around to the base of the neck. You'll find it will all fit in there nicely. I've taken my pins out there, and you can see I have gone ahead and just overcast that little side head into place there. Again, I'm working from the head gusset. Never work from the side panel of the head. It just won't give you a good result. So I've always overcast all of my seams. Especially on working something small like this, you get a much better shape. Now I won't sew this one on the machine at all. I'm going to hand sew this whole little head, and the way I do that is I'm using a stab back stitch. It's the stitch we use for any kind of soft sculpture work. It's very, very strong. I've got a video that shows you how to do it. I'll put a link up the top there, but I'll show you here. So I'm starting, because I'm working on the front section of the face, which is that creamy colour, I'm using my cream extra strong thread. You must use an extra strong thread for sewing this stitch. And I have a single strand and a knot in the end. So I'm just going to come in from the underside there. I'm first just going to anchor a couple of stitches. Now, if you feel like you want to sew this on the machine, of course you can go right ahead. You just have to be very aware of keeping all of those curves nice and smooth. And I just find it easier, quicker and more accurate to sew this stitch here. So I've really anchored that base in there. And I'm going to start my stab back stitch. Now a stab back stitch goes through both layers. I always double up on my first couple of stitches, just so that it's really strong. So hopefully you can see that there. I'm just coming in from behind and I'm keeping my stitches nice and small. I'm staying with what is my 4mm seam allowance. And I've come through and I've come back into that hole, that exit hole that I just came out of. So I'm making my stitches from behind. So I'm travelling a little way along the length of a stitch, nice and small, back into that exit hole that I just came out of each time. So that makes this stitch a fully linked stitch. It's sewn back and front, so it's just like machine sewing it 2 times. If you are going to machine sew this section, I would have your stitch length on your machine to set to about a number 2 and keep those stitches nice and small, and definitely sew this seam 2 times. I'm going to go right ahead and I'm going to continue and get that one side head panel stitched in. Make sure that you're keeping those little antennae away from your seams. Then I'm going to go ahead and pin the other side in, remembering to work from the head gusset so everything stays nice and balanced. I will overcast that one in and then back stab back stitch that piece in as well. And so there we go, that has our little head all stitched and turned through. Do make sure when you're stitching those little side pieces in that you change your thread colour once you get to your cap section, whatever colour your cap is, change that to match. Turn that one through and really rolled out those seams there. And now we make sure those little antennae are pulled up, and we're going to just fill this little head. So we want that nice and firm as always, because we're going to be adding our little eyes and the mouth in there, and it's easier to do that when the head is packed very, very firm. This one actually fills really easily with your fingers, so if you don't have forceps, you'll find this really quite simple. But I would recommend that you use if you have a wool felting needle, use your wool felting needle to pack those fibres in to keep it all nice and pushed out. You want to make sure this little bottom cheek section is really nice and plumped out. So I'm going to fill that one right up to almost the edge there, and then we will pop in that joint. And there I have that little head all filled out there, and I've used my felting needle there, you can see, just to pack all those fibres in. It's a nice flat surface there. And I've sewn a running stitch with a doubled strand of extra strong thread, starting at the back just a little way in from the edge, and I'm going to tie that one off once I've popped my little joint in. So there is my joint, whether you're using the little button style, which will have your button and your 2 threads out, or perhaps you're using a cotter pin joint, or the same as I have here. We just pop that in. I've got my first knot already tied. I will pull those edges in, push that little joint in. I'll need to do that off camera, and I will pull those edges right into as close as I can around that bolt, and then I'll knot that off at least 4 times. So now we're going to add our eyes. So I'm using teddy bear glass eyes here, so these are added after the head is filled. If you're going to be using safety eyes, you would temporarily fill the head check for your eye placement, make your marks there like I have, then you would add your safety eyes, then refill. So, but these are teddy bear eyes, and if you're adding buttons you can do them the same way. So what I'm going to do is I've got a doubled strand of extra strong thread, quite long, and then I fold it again, so I've actually got 4 strands. I'm taking that little eye there and I'm just going to slip that folded end through that shank, open that one out and pull all of those thread ends through so that I've got that eye nice and tightly captured on the end there. I'll use this one that I've got ready. I'm now going to take my doll needle, my largest doll needle, and take all 4 of those ends through my needle and pull that one through. So now I've got the little eye on the end. I've made the holes, I've marked them in place, and I've made the holes with my awl, and I've pushed that awl right the way through to make a bit of a channel for that thread to go through. And you can see the eye placement there. Remember that they pull in, so wherever you put your eyes, remember they pull in and sink in a little bit deeper, but it's probably about 1.5 centimetres from the top arch above that eye, and you can see probably about 0.5 centimetre from the edge of each of those. So have a look at it from every angle though, make sure you've got that right. So then you take your large doll needle and you're just going to take it straight through that mark that you've made. You want to come out somewhere at the back, down low, and pull that eye all the way through. And that one will pull in. As you can see there, we'll be able to really tie that one in well. So I always like to make a knot in the end of one of my eye threads so that I know when I'm tying them off at the end that I can isolate each side to pull those eyes in evenly. So now I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to take my needle again with this little eye threaded. I'm going to go through that eye there, eye hole, but I'm going to come out of the same hole that I did with the other eye. So to make that easier, just pop your awl in that hole. Makes it easier for your doll needle to find it coming through that second time. So I'm going to get that second one in place. So now I have both of those thread ends coming out through that same hole. I've tied a preliminary first knot and I can pull that in, and I can push down with my thumbs and keep pulling until I've got those eyes pulled in and sunk as deep as I want them to be. I do want them to sit back a fair way, and remember we're going to be adding our little smile, which is also going to pull the front of that face in. So just make sure that they're pulled in equally. Then all you need to do is knot that one off, keeping the tension up at least 4 times, and you'll snip and lose your thread ends into the head because you're actually tying off into the stuffing, not the surface of the felt there. So once those eyes are in place, we're going to stitch in our one little stitch that is for our little smile, and I have got a doubled strand of, I've got 8 ply. Let me just check that. I'm pretty sure I have 8 ply. Yes, I do. So I've got 8 ply pearl thread there, and I have come in at the back, and I've got a double strand, and I'm using my medium doll needle this time. You can see that I've added my 2 little marks for my smile. You have to remember too that will pull in, that stitch will pull in, so it will come in smaller. It's probably about 1 centimetre from each side seam there, and where it sits is right on the most prominent part of that little face when it comes outwards there. So I'm just bringing my doll needle out, and I want to come out exactly on that little spot that I've made. Might take a couple of times, but we'll get there. Pull that one all the way through, make sure that knot is held. Then we're just going to pull that one across, make sure that your strands aren't twisted, keeping up tension. And we're going to dive back in at that other point, come out at the back, And then we'll take our needle down to the base, pull that tension up, make sure you've got a nice little pull in on that mouth, and then we will cast off under here. And there you can see that little smile all pulled in, gives us a lovely little cheek area there. You could add a little bit of shading there with pastels if you wanted to colour up those cheeks a tiny bit, that would be sweet. Also you could deepen that little corner with a tiny little bit of probably a raw sienna pencil, just to give a bit more depth to that whole little face. Now you can see there that I have trimmed my antennae, and there I've got mine about 4.5 centimetres, a little bit shorter than this one. The shorter they are, the more upright they will stay. You can cut them even shorter than that if you wish. I'm going to be adding just a little bit of clear craft glue on the end of that hat elastic and just popping those beads on, and then we can set that one aside to dry while we start to work on our body. You could also use hot glue for those, so make those little antennae as long or as short as you like. The first things that we do on our body is take our body front section and we're going to add our detailing. You can see I've just added my little rickrack pieces there and sewn my button into place, so that one's all ready. And then on your side body pieces you'll have marks on your pattern template that tell you where to put those little braids. So I have them all cut to length, and I've just stitched them just inside that seam allowance with right sides together facing this way. We're going to incorporate those little legs into the seam when we sew this one together. So you do that on both of those pieces, so they're already in place. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sew that centre back seam, which is from the base here. You can use your pins or clips from the base here. Make sure you're really back and forth, and we're going to sew a 4mm seam allowance up to that neck edge, and make sure you're back and forth, and I will sew that seam 2 times. You can go ahead and push that seam out the right way and roll that seam out while you can still get to that well. Pop that one back, and now we're going to tuck in all of those little ends, and we're going to sew our front on one side and align it up there using clips or pins, whatever you like, and pin that one into place right down to the base there. And we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to stitch 2 times this side, and then we're going to pin that one in place and stitch that one 2 times. Now once you have that one all stitched up there, next step is just to sew another little doubled extra strong thread running stitch around that top of that neck there, just a little way in, and pull that neck in, leaving just enough room for your bolt to pass through from your joint with your head. And then all we're going to do is pull that one all the way through, and make sure that all of those seams are pushed out. So you've now got all of those little arm and leg braids nicely in position. Do make sure that you roll out those seams, and then all we need to do is fill that. Actually, that's not true, is it? All we need to do is add the little head first. So whichever jointing method you're using, there's our little body, we're going to add the head. So whether you're using your button joints or the same as I am, or a cotter pin, we're just going to add that little head. This is always very exciting to see them start to come together, and push that one all the way through. Collapse that body down so we can get down to that neck there. There we go, to show that little bolt there. Pop that disc on, washer, and wind down your cotter pin joints, or take that through your button if you're doing the button joint. Now I only just finger tighten it initially just to make sure I've got all of the fabric out from around there. Then I will tighten that up. I will take my spanner, tighten that up, and I will use my super glue because I'm using the nuts and bolts, and I will add a drop of super glue right there in those threads so that nut will never come adrift. And then of course our next step is just to fill that body nice and firm again with our polyester filling. Tuck that in there with your forceps. Make sure that you get it all packed nice and firm around that neck bolt so that you've got a lovely clean little neck circle there. Get that one filled up right to almost the edge using your wool felting needle. Pack it nice and flat, ready for us to add our little base disc. So there we go, that has our ladybug all filled out nicely. See, it's nice and firm around that neck. And now I've gone ahead and sewn that same double drawstring starting at the back, double strand of extra strong thread, just about 1/2 centimetre in from the base, and you can see also that I've packed that filling nice and firm there and nice and flat, ready for us to add that disc, which we just pop in there. And then I'm just going to pull those threads up. Now with this one, we don't have to pull that right into those edges meet. We just want enough cover, because you have to remember we're going to be adding our felt disc over the top there, which will cover that. So just pull it in enough so you've got a nice edge. I will knock that off about 4 times. And so our next step, once that one is all pulled in, is we're just going to go ahead and add that little felt base cover. And I've just liberally coated that base with clear craft glue, you can see there, and just going to drop that one into place. Check it from all sides, make sure you've got it nicely centered, and make sure all of those edges are pressed nice and flat. And we're going to set that one aside to dry, because we really don't want to do any sewing until that's perfectly dry. We can press that nice and flat, and while that's drying we can go ahead and start work on our wings. So the wings for our ladybug are actually really simple. So we're basically going to be just stitching them on in a shawl-like manner, just with a couple of buttons. So all we really need to do to them is we're going to sew a blanket stitch around the entire outside edge. And I have just taken my 8-ply again, pearl thread, and I am come in from the underneath. This is the side that's going to be against the back, so we're not going to see that little knot. And I've come out at the base there. Now if you haven't sewn a blanket stitch before, I'm going to put the link up the top there for you to have a look, but it's quite simple and it's just a lovely decorative binding stitch for the outside edge that really stops those edges from fraying. I guess it's optional because we have got the felt there and the fusible webbing, so they are a pretty good no fray edge with this fabric and felt combination, but I like that extra detailing. So you can see there that I'm just putting my needle through all the layers, bringing that needle out through the loop. I have a very long thread because I don't like to run out, and pulling that needle out through the loop, and that creates that little binding stitch that goes across the top. Pulling that one through, and that will cover that raw edge all the way around. Easier to see on this little one. Again, she's very limp, but you can see that's a lovely edge. So I go ahead and I stitch all around that outside of the top little wing section, which will sit up more like this, and then also all around the lower wing section, and then we will just add our buttons. Now once you've got your blanket stitching done on your wing sections, on both of those, you can add your buttons. Now I've only used 8 buttons, but you can put as many as you like, remembering that our little wing section gets added here, which we will do now, and when that wraps around the back you do see more of this wing. So you can add a couple more buttons if you like. So now I'm going to go ahead and just, the way that I attach that top wing section is just with a button. So I'm just going to sew that one on right in the center there, and that keeps those little wing pieces free. And so that has our wings completed there, and you can see the positioning of that one. I've just met that lower point up with the little apex there, so you've got a little space of about 1 centimetre from the top. As we pull those little lower wings around the neck and shoulders, we get that lovely little wing sitting up there. So we can just pop those aside for now, and now that our Lovebug's base is all nice and dry, we can go ahead and sew our blanket applique stitch on that one, just avoiding all those little arms and legs. So what I've done is I'm using my pearl thread, and I've got a single strand, it's 8 ply. I've just tucked my knot in between those layers there. This is going to be a little bit hard to see on the black, but I do need to use black. But I'm just going to sew a blanket applique stitch, which is just going right in to that base, coming out and taking up some of the fabric that's actually on the body side there, bringing my needle out through the loop, avoiding all the little legs, let go, bringing my needle out through the loop and anchoring that stitch into place. And I'm just going to make my way around that base, and it just does give it a really lovely finish. It's a great professional finish, and it just covers that little white core of your interfacing as well. So I'm just going to make my way right around that little circle disc. So I have that base in place now, and our next step is to add our little beads for our arms, which you can see I've done there, little arms and legs there. I have simply added my bead and tied a knot in the end and just snipped the ends there. I'm quite happy with that fraying away there. And the length that I've made mine is the entire arm measures about 12 centimetres. That's right to the end there. So you can make them as long as you like, and I've made them these 2 sections both exactly the same length. As they drop, of course, one sits a little higher than the other, which is absolutely ideal. So next we're going to do our little boots, and we just need to fold those pattern pieces right sides together, and we're just going to stitch from the top of the ankle there all the way around to that little base there, and then we will turn them through to add some stuffing. Okay, so that has my boots made and turned through. Now, if you struggle a little with small pieces for turning through, you're most welcome to leave the interfacing off of the little boot pieces. That will help you turn it through. Make sure that you use your forceps if you have them, and remember you must keep to that very small 4mm seam allowance so that your pieces can be turned through. But taking away the interfacing might help you a little bit. So I've now gone ahead and filled my little boots with my polyester filling, just using my forceps, tucking that filling in there and packing those out quite firm. Once I have those filled up, I've got a nice little firm little boot like that. And then I've taken a doubled strand of extra strong thread, and I've started at the back, and I've just sewn a little tight running stitch around that top edge, and that's all ready for me to tie off. So I'm actually going to make my first knot ready. Just makes it easier for tying off. There we go. And I have cut those lower legs to the same sort of length as the arms. It's around about 12 or 13mm, and I've tied a knot in the end and just cut that one off. So you can see I'm just going to tuck that end of that knot in there. I've left enough room at the top there for me to do that, and then all I need to do is pull in those threads, tie those off and that knot will keep that little boot in place. You could also add some beads to those legs first before you did that. If you wanted to do that, you can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to knot that one off at least 4 times and just snip off those thread ends. You can then go ahead and add some little white laces if you like, just with a crossover stitch there as I have with that one, and tie them up in a bow, and I would use my pearl thread for that. So I'm going to go ahead and get those boots into place. Okay, so our final step with Lovebug is to add those wings. So I've just pinned those into place. So basically it's as simple as taking that lower layer, you just wrap it around Lovebug's neck and pin into place either side there. I'm going to be using two red buttons to add my wings. You don't have to use buttons, but I think with a little project like this, extra buttons always looks good, that little bit of detailing. So what I've done is I've made a little mark here. I don't know if you can see that. I've made it just with a white gel marker there, so I know exactly where to go in, and I've done the same on the other side. So I'm simply going to take my medium doll needle, because I need to pass through that body. I've got a double strand of extra strong thread, and I'm going through one of the holes of my button. I'm going to let that button just sit there. Take out my pin, and then I'm going to go through that little wing section and through where I've made that mark, and I'm going to pass my needle right the way through to the other mark on the other side, and I'm just going to come out the front of that wing section where I want that button to sit. Remove that pin. Don't want to lose the button on the other side. So I'm going to keep a hold of that. There we go, so I can pull that through. And I go through a hole on that button, and then of course back through again. And then I'm going to just make sure that button is nicely centered on that point there. Take my needle through, and then take my needle through again, traveling a slightly different path through that mark. And I want to bring my needle back through close to that mark on the other side again, not through the same hole. And take a little bit of juggling. And then I want to come through that wing again and through the other hole in that button. So I've got both of those threads pulling that through. I'm going to do that. It's a bit hard to do that on camera. I'm going to do that and show you how that looks. So there we go. I've now got that little button on, and I've got my threads have gone through, back through the button, back through the body, and back through this starting point with the button again. So now all I need to do is just tie off. So I'm going to tie and knot that off about 3 times, pulling that little cape wing section into place, and you've got the nice little detail of those buttons. And so there we go, my friends. That is our completed Lovebug, and I can't believe how fresh and happy she looks compared to this poor old soul. This one feels like me, droopy and old. But But doesn't she look sprightly and fresh? Really lovely. So you can see those little wings do sit up, and these are quite strong, these little antennae. Such a lovely little result. Can somebody please make her up in orange so that I can get to see it? I'm really looking forward to that, and whatever incredible colours you come up with. Just and a little pattern tweak I've got for you too, because of course we do have little Mr. B, little shelf sitter as well. This is a much simpler procedure, putting together this little one, but you can actually make this pattern up in your B colours, leave the wings off and switch the wings out for these ones, and you will have the perfect little bumblebee with that more complicated little head, which I think is really worth the effort. I know there's a bit of hand stitching there, but definitely worth it for that real 3D look. I hope you've really enjoyed seeing this one. I know a lot of you have been waiting for this one, so I hope you all get bitten by my little love bug. Well, thank you all for watching today. I hope you've enjoyed seeing this little one come together. If you have, you could give me a thumbs up. That would be absolutely beaut. I am so excited to see all of the colours and all of the little ways that you're going to embellish this one. And if you want to share your finished creations, please come along and join our wonderful Facebook group called Share Your Lisa Pay Creations and Pay It Forward. And on that Facebook page you can see what others are making. We all share all different creations. There's lots of hints and tips on there, so definitely come along and be a part of the fun. I'll put that link in the description box below as well. Alternatively, you can also follow me on Instagram, and you can send me pictures there. You can also ask me any technical questions you like. I am absolutely here to help. And also you can follow me, Lisa Pay, on Pinterest, and you can send me pictures straight to there, and then I can pin them on our special board called You Made It. And we really want these lovely little creations of yours to be seen. And you should show off your work. You should all feel very proud. I'm very proud of all of you. I'm excited to see what you're doing. So make sure, everybody, if you haven't subscribed, please do so, because we don't want you to miss out on any of the fun, and we want you to become a part of our community. So everybody, in the meantime, stay safe, stay creative, and remember all of the good things that come to you in your day and make you happy. How about you pay them forward to somebody else? Until next time, it's hooroo from me.